Hello, everyone, and welcome to the seventh lecture of Shastra Spotlight on the Wells Fargo Day 4 of Shastra 2021. This National Science Day, as ISRO takes its first launch of the year, we are extremely honored to have with us Dr. K. Radhakrishnan. Dr. K. Radhakrishnan was the chairman of ISRO, Secretary, Department of Space, and chairman of the Space Commission from 2009 to 2014. Under his leadership, India's first planetary exploration, Mars Orbiter mission, also known as Mangalyaan, was conceived, planned, and successfully executed, all within a time frame of 4 years, establishing India as the first country to have a successful mission to Mars in its maiden attempt. Dr. Radhakrishnan is currently the chairperson of Board of Governors of IIT Kanpur and IIT Ropar, chairman of the Standing Committee of the IIT Council, a member of the National Security Advisory Board, and an Honorary Distinguished Advisor at Department of Space ISRO. In addition, he's also a Kathakali and Carnatic music enthusiast. In recognition of his stellar contributions to the Indian space program, the nation honored him with the Padma Bhushan in 2014. We are really honored to have you with us, sir.
Thank you. I'm also happy and privileged to be interacting with you and your friends.
Thank you so much, sir. So without further ado, let's proceed with the fireside chat.
Yeah, thank you.
So, sir, around the time of your graduation from the Government Engineering College at Thrissur, you had faced a dilemma of choosing between attending a recruitment process at IITM and its Space Science and Technology Center at Thumba. So both of which were scheduled to happen on the same day. And you choose to go for the latter, and the rest is history. And now looking back, how do you feel about that choice, and what exactly influenced your decision?
The credit goes to my professor, Professor M.S. and Poiti, who advised me that I choose Tumba, who had at that time the satellite launch vehicle project in the offing. Probably being his student for 3 years, he knew me well and felt that I am more suited for that job. 37 years later, when I became the director of the same place, Vikram Sarabhai Space Center, I again asked this question to him, how do you feel now? He said, yes, at that time, that was the best thing I could have told you. But today, if I had to give such an advice, I will do it differently. What is that different one? He did not tell me. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. That was really inspirational. Talking about your associations with various organizations along with ISRO, so you have closely worked in the field of remote sensing in several capacities, so including at Regional Remote Sensing Center, IMSD, and the National Remote Sensing Agency. So this included generating a spatial database of the national resources of nearly 85 million hectares of India. How strategically important has that task been for India's progress?
It's important for the society. One of the major USP of the Indian space program is we use here the space technology for finding solutions to the problems of man and society. In what way you find that solution? We have a large amount of land, so how to use that land effectively, how to preserve the water resources. These are the two questions which the local governments and the central government, state governments, all are worried about. So this is one way to help them to understand the latest status of the land on which you can overlay the proper plans. And this is one of the major contributions. And this was called one of the major experiments on space applications ever done in the world, with participation from the local agencies too. Yeah.
Thank you, sir, for this insights. So in July 2000, you took over as the director of the Indian National Center for Ocean Information Services. And you have termed this as your professional rebirth, as you had to bid adieu to ISRO and plunge into the realm of ocean sciences. So how was that transition like in moving from this field of space technology to ocean sciences?
It is going out of your comfort zone and trying to establish in a totally different field. We call it domain switching. So there is a lot of learning involved, getting accepted in that professional community. And also bring to the table all that experience, wisdom that you have earned in the previous years. So this was done. The second one, I also started with a feeling that if you are creating a new institution that has to make a difference to the country, and how did we make that difference? That came when the tsunami came in 2004 December. And here we felt an early warning system is the need of the hour. And how do we put all our resources within our institute, within our departments, and the central government agencies to build an early warning system? And I should say, I had a boss at that time, the Secretary of the Department of Ocean Development, and me, we worked in tandem and we got it done. And this made a difference for the country, for the entire Indian Ocean region. So that was a moment of satisfaction that we were into such a major national mission.
So could you also give us some insights into the Indian Ocean tsunami warning system as to how exactly that is?
See, tsunami is an aftermath of an earthquake that takes place on the seabed. The Pacific Ocean is very well known for frequent tsunamis, and they are ready with warning systems, early warning systems. While an earthquake cannot be predicted, a tsunami happening afterwards can be understood within a few minutes. How do you sense that from the deep space with the sensors there? How do you understand? How do you model the transmission of that energy to the seashore? And how do you find out the impact of it? How do you confirm this? How do you inform the people around? And how do you help the local agencies to move? All this have to happen in half an hour to 1 or 2 hours. So this was the challenge. There were several disciplines, several institutions. We put all of them together. And an automated system, because this has to work on 24/7 basis. And tsunami may occur once in a year or so, but every time one has to be alert on this. And it is an automatic system. Probably what we have built in India is one of the best in the world today.
Thank you, sir. That was really insightful. Now, talking about the Indian space program, Dr. Sarabhai's vision for the Indian space program was to harness space science and technology for the benefit of the common man. And most of our initial missions were in line with his original vision, mainly focusing on space applications such as land mapping, weather warning systems, etc. And we have now begun to head towards a new space vision with exploratory missions such as Chandrayaan and Mangalyaan. And in this regard, where do you think India's current position is, and what should be done? What should be the best strategy moving forward?
See, first and foremost, the kernel of the Indian space program, as it started, is societal. The focus is how to use it, applications. As we developed our capability in launch vehicles, in satellites, as our aspirations grew, as the world changed, India also got into lunar mission, that is Chandrayaan, and then later into the Mars mission. And currently we are into the human space flight mission. If you look at globally, there are more than 70 nations who are involved in space activity in a very major way. At least about 12 of them have the launch capability. Now, if you look at the space agencies around the world, India is the 6th one. We have US, Russia, China, the European Space Agency, which is a consortium, Japan, and then India. Coming to the specifics, if you talk about the launch vehicle capability, our GSLV Mark III is the most powerful vehicle that we have, which can put around 10 ton into a low Earth orbit. If you look at China or Europe, they are around 20 to 25 ton into LEO. If you take US today, it is close to 65 tons into LEO with the Elon Musk Falcon 3 Heavy. If you look at the communication satellites, we are also into the state-of-the-art, high technology, high-tech, high-throughput communication satellites. If you look at the remote sensing, we have the Cartosat 3 with 28 centimeter resolution. That means the smallest object that you can find out through that. And if you look at the navigation system, we have a regional navigation system. So we are there. What we don't have today is the human spaceflight capability, which we are building. So that is the current status today. But on applications, I should emphasize that India is considered the role model for the entire world in terms of our reach, in terms of the way we have penetrated into the value system of the user agencies.
That's really exciting. So India has usually set aside about 7 to 8% of its annual budget for such exploratory missions. And but if you look at the last couple of decades, what aspires to the youth of the nation is mainly these exploratory missions such as Chandrayaan and Mangalyaan. So moving forward, do you think there's a need to reconsider this allocation and have a greater focus on exploratory missions as well?
See, they are all interrelated, number one. And if you talk about the space activity today, in the new space age, I consider there are 5 elements of it. One is understanding about the humanity. That is where the space exploration comes. The exciting field, which is exciting, which requires the cutting edge technology to be brought in, and the science. Another area is evolving. How do we use the celestial resources for the benefit of the people on Earth? This is the exploitation part of it. They are closely related. The second one is the engagement or the space applications for human well-being, to look at climate, to look at environment, to look at the national security, etc., etc. This is another part of it. Now, today we talk about large number of satellites in the orbit, which is close to 2,000. And it is a big enterprise, something close to 366 billion US dollar, as the space economy talked about. And 75% of that is from the commercial activity. So this is another dimension to it. But if all this have to happen, you require cutting edge science and technology engineering into it, in terms of launch vehicle, spacecraft, in terms of space robotics for exploration, or looking at the space debris, which is an emerging field, or new ways of propulsion, etc., etc. So one has to have a balanced approach in all these areas. So that is important. Now, the linkage I talked about. When you have a cutting edge exploration activity, you also develop many new technologies which will eventually become useful for the space applications. For example, it is very well known that the telescopes looking at the sky were reversed and we got into remote sensing. The smartness which you built in the Mangalyaan, which becomes useful tool for all the satellites for communication, remote sensing, navigation, etc. So it feeds into the system. Plus also a lot of spin-off technologies for other applications. But you require a balanced approach. The question is where your emphasis is. So our bedrock is applications. So we have systems required for that.
Thank you for the detailed answers. It was really a lot of information. Now, after multiple failures, the GSLV often termed as a naughty boy of ISRO, was finally tamed on the 5th January 2014 with the successful launch of GSLV D5, and that too with an indigenous cryogenic engine, which culminated the 20 years of toil of ISRO scientists. So what exactly went behind that success, and how important was it for the future missions?
See, rocket science is very risky. That's why we use the term rocket science for anything that is uncharted. And in space, there will be failures, and one learns from the failures. One also improves even when you have a success. We had such experience in SLV3, in ASLV, in PSLV2. But in GSLV, the failures were more if you take the initial few flights. I would say checkered track record. So as chairman in 2010, I had the first flight of the cryogenics on a GSLV, which failed. The same year, we had another flight of GSLV. That time it was with the Russian cryogenic engine. That was also a failure for different reasons. The question is, how did we tackle this? So it was a focused activity on finding out what is the inherent problem in GSLV itself. Have we understood all those issues? So we had a series of reviews looking at the past data of all the flights and trying to understand, putting together the brains of ISRO and even external experts. People seeing it from a distance may be able to find certain patterns. The second one was on the cryogenic engine. First time we were getting into it, ignited, and then it stopped. What was the basic reason? So we went through the conventional mechanisms of finding out the failure modes, etc., etc. This was another part of it. We also tried to say, had they worked in the beginning, few seconds, would have sustained? This is another part of it. We had used certain methods of simulation. We wanted to enhance that with testing in the high altitude condition. Exactly at what height this is going to happen has to be simulated for that environment. So all this were done at that time. This is one part which is technical. Then there is a managerial aspect of it, the quality aspects, the reliability aspects. Have we looked at all those? Because if a small component has a small problem during assembly, and if it is not seen at that time, later it may become a leak and a failure. So the quality systems were enhanced. We said zero defect program. We also had the management team to become more cohesive and focus towards the issues. And all this done over a period of 2 years yielded the result finally. It was a comprehensive way of looking at the issue, or a holistic way of solution.
Thank you, sir. So following up on that, you have mentioned that your close observation of Professor U.R. Rao, who is also termed as the Bhishma Pitamaha of ISRO, during the repeated failures of the ASLVs, have helped you immensely in overcoming the failures of GSLV launches. So could you tell us more about them?
See, the first generation, second generation leaders and members of ISRO team, they went through a lot of failures, whether it is in sounding rocket in the 60s or in the satellites and launch vehicles in the 70s, or the ASLV failures of the 80s. I was fortunate to be working very closely with this chairman, Professor Satish Dhawan and Professor U.R. Rao. So when you see the first failure of ASLV with the Prime Minister and team there, when you get, after 1 year, one more failure of ASLV, and the entire team is there with heavy hearts, how a leader should take the program forward, how the leader should inspire the team and take them forward, how the leader has to be accountable to the whole country and stand there, taking the responsibility for the failure. All this I learned watching these two great people, Professor Satish Dhawan and Professor U.R. Rao. And these are lessons which you don't get in any textbook or in any classroom.
It's really true. So talking about the Chandrayaan One mission, it was a major breakthrough considering that it was the first time we had stepped out of the Earth's gravitational field. And so how important was that success in further exploratory missions?
Yeah, my entry into Chandrayaan One was towards the end of it as I became Director of National Remote Sensing Agency in 2005, and then later Director of Vikram Sarabhai Space Center, where the PSLV XL version, what we see today, was really developed. What Chandrayaan gave to the team and India is a confidence that, yes, we can do it. And that was a successful mission. It also gave opportunity for international cooperation, which of course resulted in some major discoveries. Infrastructure-wise, we had the deep space tracking network set up in India. So these were all investments on which later missions of Chandrayaan 2 or Mars orbiter were conceived and built. And we also had at that time the capability in our propulsion system to restart even after 30 days. In Chandrayaan 2, we had to do it after 15 days, and the system was qualified for 30 days. So these are all stepping stones for the subsequent missions. And most important thing is the confidence that we can go beyond Earth and then do a mission precisely.
Thank you, sir. So the Chandrayaan 2 mission was initially supposed to have a Russian rover and lander. And due to a potential delay in the delivery of same, we went ahead with the indigenous lander. If we look at the past, there have been other instances as well where we have had to push for indigenous technologies due to other constraints. So do you think working with such constraints has made ISRO push its boundaries and become more self?
These difficulties or these denials are forcing functions for us to go with grit and determination and develop indigenous technology. The very fact in 1992, India was denied the cryogenic technology led to the indigenous development. So we made it for the GSLV. And we also had another cryogenic engine and stage developed for our GSLV Mark III. Similar thing happened for the Chandrayaan 2. The original plan was we will fly a Russian lander rover system. And it was not available. We decided to understand what is involved in a lander, a rover, and we built it. And we were almost close to it. And that is where we are. But to me, that is beginning of a new era of technology development of the lander system and rover system.
Sir. So you have often talked about the synergy of ISRO with the Indian space industry, academia, user community, and several national R&D laboratories. For instance, the user agencies could take up space application technology, or the industry could take up manufacturing. So how important is this step, and where do you think the Indian space program stands today in this facility?
See, one of the major decisions that ISRO took or India took in the 70s is to leverage on the capacity and capability of the Indian industry, both private and public sector, to support the space program, rather than investing and enhancing our own infrastructure and manpower. So this has yielded results. During the Mars Orbiter mission, we had 125 firms, large one, medium, small, micro, contributing to the launch vehicle program, satellite program. Now that number has gone up. What has happened in the year 2020 is the reform which empowers the private sector to get involved in many front line technologies and programs. So this is going to yield the results, number one. Number two, this also enabled the enthusiastic startup groups to contribute to the space program in different ways. Let me just say, in manufacturing of the launch vehicle systems or the satellite systems, especially when you have small satellites coming up in a large way. We talk about constellations of hundreds of satellites. So this is one aspect of it. Second one, if you want to be better than sixth in the world, what is required is innovation and new technologies. And if you have to do first-class science, you require novel instruments. This requires innovation. And the young minds have a lot of opportunity in this area to get involved. And self-reliance also will require such innovations and the capabilities. The third one, there is a lot of spin-off applications from the space technology in which one can focus. Now, if you look at globally, the ground equipment required for use in the space systems and for the services, especially with the new technologies like AI, data analytics, and 30, 40 years of satellite data available in store, you get a different perspective of the Earth. You can have solutions. So these are all the areas in which now you get large number of players coming into the system. And in fact, it is a landmark development. Yet another landmark development at the moment.
So we also hope that the opening up of space sector for private players turns out to be announced. Talking about Mangalyaan, As mentioned by you, India had just decided to send the Mars Orbiter mission in August 2012 with a launch target of November 2030. And that was a time when Maven was already ready to be integrated into spacecraft. Curiosity had already landed. Adding to the anxiety was the fact that over 60% of the previous missions to Mars by other space agencies were failures. Yet we were able to successfully execute it in our maiden attempt. So, how confident was the team on successfully pulling off the project on time?
As I said, the Chandrayaan mission had built in that confidence. What next after Chandrayaan 1? This aspiration was also there that we should look at Mars, we should look at Sun, of course, from an orbit of Earth. So in 2010, we started this process with a 100-member study team. They had a detailed study for almost a year. And in June 2011, they came up with the report saying that the next opportunity, which happens once in 26 months, is there in November 2013 launch. And if we miss that, we can look at after 26 months, but it requires a larger launch vehicle capability. Then it goes to 2018. So we wanted to capture this opportunity of 2013, which was possible with whatever we had, the PSLV launch vehicle itself, with a novel way of orbit racing, even though we didn't have the capability like what US had at that time. So we decided to go for it. The number two, there were a lot of new technologies to be developed for this Mars orbiter mission. I will come to it later. And also infrastructure development. So we thought we should look at it. The third aspect was with the consecutive failures of GSLVs, the organization also needed a big boost at that time. And when you are in difficult times, you look for a tough target. And if you can achieve that, then you turn around. So all these considerations went behind that. And that is how we decided to take up that challenge of November 2013. And we did it also. Now, coming to the situation, what are the new technologies? In Chandrayaan, we talk about a distance of 4 lakh kilometers. Here we talk about even 400 million kilometers. Okay. It has to traverse a long distance, which is almost 600 million kilometers. That means on the spacecraft that you are going to send, you require communication systems. You have to have commanding systems. You need to have tracking systems and ranging systems to handle that distance. So we had to develop, for example, high-sensitive telecommand receivers. That work was on it. We had to develop a restart capability for the propulsion system. After 300 days, it had to work. So we started that activity from 30 days to 300 days. This was another activity. The deep space network, we have the basic infrastructure of one station. We had to augment that power. Plus, when you arrange objects at that distance, you require a different technology. It is called delta DOR technology. You look at a quasar simultaneously and try to find out where your object is. So this technology had to be developed. Software-wise, the most important thing was to provide autonomy for this spacecraft, because at least 15 days in a year, you won't have the line of sight with the spacecraft. Second one, a signal may take even 20 minutes to reach there. So if something goes wrong in the spacecraft, you take a lot of time. By the time you have gone further, worse. So we had to put autonomy, and an autonomy or smartness in the spacecraft, which will not even misguide it, actually. That means you require proper design and more testing simulation. So all this we had to take it. What we had from the previous flight was standardized structure, propellant tank, power systems, etc., etc. So what we did was, we had to do this in a few months, So we had a judicious way of parallelizing all the activities. The integration of the spacecraft started with the available items. The new developments started parallelly, and we injected these new developments into that in the early part of 2013. So even though the launch was ready for November, the new systems were getting ready, developed only in the beginning of 2013. So we were running a race. Plus, you get into an orbital mission of this kind, you require rigorous testing of the spacecraft, which was also going on. And we could not even compromise with a single test on the ground. We had to do more tests. So spacecraft was being acted upon on 24 hours a day. People were coming and working around it. So all this we did. For the people who worked, it was once in a life opportunity, and they wanted to make it. So all this together, we got it.
Thank you, sir, for that detailed explanation. So as mentioned by you just now, another challenge we had for the mission was the availability of a launch vehicle. So the PSLV XL, we had limitations both in terms of payload capacity as well as in delivering the required thrust. So as you talked about the novel method used to insert into the orbit, could you please elaborate on that? And
first and foremost, when we go from Earth to Mars, we talk about minimum energy transfer. That means the orbit from where you start the process has to have certain parameters fixed. One is argument of perigee. And for this Mars mission, we require an argument of perigee close to 280 degrees. That is in the large ellipse where the injection takes place. Normally with our GSLV missions and all, we have 180 degrees. Now, how do we get into this 280 degrees? That is a trick. PSLV vehicle with its 4-stage configuration and much of the velocity added by the first 3 stages itself enables us to do that manipulation. By delaying the ignition of the 4th stage, we can get into 280 degrees argument of perigee. With the GSLV, which is more powerful, certainly, only 50% of the velocity is added by the first 2 stages. The last stage gives the rest of the 50. And it does not have a restart capability even today. So with GSLV, even though it is powerful, such a mission is not possible unless you add another propulsion system. The same is the case with GSLV Mark III. So in the near future, the only vehicle available for us for the Mars mission was PSLV itself. That is number one. So that mission design was done. But PSLV can put this orbit of 21,000 around Earth. From 21 to the point of leaving, that was the first target that we had. When it comes to the perigee, you add more velocity and raise the apogee to that level in steps. It means more stay around the Earth and also in the radiation belts. We had tried this in Chandrayaan. So we had that experience with us, but we had to do more times here. So the penalty was the radiation that the components would have gone through. But the advantage for us was all the systems were tested when the satellite was in the Earth phase itself. We took benefit of that and we went around.
thank you, sir. So the Mars orbiter mission costed about 450 crores. And if we compare it with the budget of the Maiden mission, it was roughly 1/10 of the same. So what, according to you, are the key attributes of the Indian space program that help us in minimizing such costs of missions?
Each space agency has its own philosophies for testing, for configuration, etc., etc. One thing which we have followed is modularity of the design, modularity of the stages that we use, modularity of the avionics that we use. If you look at PSLV, GSLV Mark III, there is a solid propulsion stage. S139 PSLV, the same thing comes in GSLV. An enlarged version comes in the GSLV Mark III. So we don't reinvent the wheel. If you look at, again, the liquid engine, because it is coming in the second stage of PSLV, it is there in the strap-on and second stages of GSLV. Twin engine with a longer duration is there in GSLV Mark III. Again, we cut down in the developmental effort and time there. If you look at the entire avionics of launch vehicle, that is modular. What we fly in PSLV or GSLV and GSLV Mark III are the same elements. The configuration in terms of the number, etc., may change. Redundancy may change, but the same item. So it's amenable to production, and its heritage is carried through. If you look at the spacecraft, again, the spacecraft buses we have standardized. The power systems are modules, which we can use for any one of this. So this gives a lot of advantage in terms of time and cost. The second one is for the test. There is a philosophy, what maximum you can get out of every test. And we do that. Plus the simulation, etc., goes along with that. So if you cut down the test, you reduce the time. And sometimes the first flight itself will be a test, experimental mission that we did for GSLV Mark III. The last one, here the people can work for 18 hours a day. They voluntarily come and work. Whereas in some of the other nations, there is a limit on which they will work for. For them, it's a contract. It's an employment. For us, it is devotion. It is towards a national cause. So this also makes a difference.
It's truly inspirational, sir. So apart from these challenges that we have heard of, was there an unexpected challenge or a boom that happened during the 300-day-old journey?
We had 2 glitches in the early phase of the orbit tracing. During the launch itself, we had another peculiar problem, which I will talk about later. We have for the liquid engines, which are used for the orbit tracing and also for the orbit capture, certain schemes for the flow control valve. And we found one of the options, when they tested, did not work. But immediately we could find solutions for that. So this was the first glitch. This happened in the 3rd orbit tracing itself. Had it happened in the Martian orbit, we would have lost the mission. That is why we were testing it. The second one, when we were switching the telemetry from low gain to the medium gain and later to the high gain, etc. The transition also, we had a small problem. But what we do in all these areas, we plan for the redundancies at that time so that we don't lose the mission. But the point was that redundancy had to be exercised at that point in time. And we did not leave anything for the chance for the Martian orbit. All were tested. Even the orbit capture that took place on 24th had a propulsion system which was tested 2 days before that. So we knew that it will restart. So this was the technical aspect of it. The argument of perigee, which I mentioned, required a injection of the satellite happening when the whole mission is above Pacific Ocean, and we had to have shipborne terminals. And first time we were deploying our ships, Indian ships, with the terminals in that area. The ships got into problem. The terminals had technical problem. They had to be stopped and repaired at Fiji. And there was a tornado in the Pacific Ocean at that time. So we had to wait endlessly, at least for a month, to get this cleared. That was a logistic issue, but an important issue at that time.
Thank you for those insights. So talking about the future projects at ISRO, the Gaganyaan mission has been the talk of the town ever since it was announced in 2000. And we have already completed some of the preliminary flight tests, such as the crew module re-entry test and the pad abort test. So what are the further challenges that need to be tackled before embarking on the mission?
See, the whole process started sometime in 2005, 2006 with the studies on what we require to put 2 crew members into an orbit around Earth. And we were looking at some of the critical technologies. That is why the space recovery module re-entry experiment was done. The crew module re-entry was done in 2014. Pad abort test was done. And some initial work was done on the environmental control, life support system, etc., etc. And what we saw in 2018 is the project being approved and going in full steam. The most important part of any human space flight is a reliable launch vehicle. That means human rating of the GSLV Mark III, which is an important task in front of us. Then when we come to the crew module, to provide the right kind of ambience there, and also the life support and environmental control system, which is very reliable. This is the next important aspect. Re-entry issues, yes, we have understood, but they have to be reconfirmed. And you carry crew. If something happens to the launch vehicle, we should be able to sense that well in advance, that is health monitoring of the launch vehicle. And you have to take this crew to another orbit for safe escape. Crew escape system, which should be very reliable. Like our aircraft seat ejection system. This is also done through another rocket system. So all this have to be done. Then you require the astronauts who are trained, and which is a 3-year process. And that is also to be done. What happens to them, the physiological aspects, psychological aspects, all these things have to be understood. So it's a challenging task. Work is on actually. The question is reliability and safety are the most important thing in a human mission. This is around Earth. Of course, if you go to Moon or if you try to go to Mars, there are different dimensions of it, of endurance, for example.
So with further exploratory missions such as Mangalyaan 2 and Chandrayaan in the pipeline, what according to you would be the key objectives that we would be aiming at with these missions?
See, as I said, more knowledge about the humanity, about the solar system. This is part of the space exploration. So whether it is Aditya mission trying to understand more about the corona from an orbit which is called L1 orbit. L1, L2 points are there, which you must be knowing 1.5 kilometer away from, and where Earth will not be a hindrance to the observation because we are in between Earth and the Sun. So that is our next task. Our astrosat is still going on doing good experiments and good output is coming out of it. The Mars 2 is another step, an orbiter mission with more scientific component. Mangalyaan was a technology mission. Ability to reach there was our issue. But now the focus will be more scientific experiments, taking note of what others have been already doing. Now we get into another neighbor, that is Chandrayaan actually. And if you look at voyage to other planets in the solar system, going to Venus is also important for the gravity assist missions. So that is one of the next steps. Finally, where we are, the humanity is now looking at habitat in Moon, habitat in Mars at a possible age, or the technologies for that, or space stations, deep space stations for this purpose, in space. Platforms like ISS extended in the lunar vicinity and close to Mars. So these are all the directions of space science.
Thank you for this insight, sir. So brain drain is a key issue being faced by all Indian organizations, with students from leading Indian institutions going to foreign companies post-graduation. With a large chunk of fresh recruits into ISRO coming from Indian colleges, do you think this is a potential threat to the future of the Indian space program?
See, I can talk about ISRO's experience in 1960s or 1970s. ISRO was the destination for some of the best students of engineering and science. Things changed by the late 80s, 90s, when the boom of IT came up. But after Chandrayaan 1, when the quality of work or the research and the excitement from that and your position in the society around you changed, also remuneration also went up compared to other national institutions. We are getting some of the best brains and they stay with us. So we didn't have that problem. So the problem of late 80s and 90s got resolved in this process. So Mangalyaan, Chandrayaan, human space flight mission, these all kindles people. The kick of doing something new keeps them here. And 30 to 40% extra money also goes to them based on the performance. So this also helps. But at the global level, if you look at it, it is the ecosystem, it is the opportunity, it is the kind of challenge that you pose in front of them and the national feeling that will keep the people to be here. Indian brains to be used for intellectual property rights to be created for India. That should be our motto.
Thank you, sir. Now, we are all well aware of your ardent interest in the field of Carnatic music and Kathakali. So how profound an impact have these had in your life, especially in the 10 days leading to launches of such instances?
Impact is that it has been with me for the last 60 years. In one way, it's a test of perseverance, because along with the studies, along with the profession, you also carry this through. So that is one part of it. But it helps, it distresses. That's the most important advantage from the music, which I still pursue. Plus, I should say, you continue to be a student, irrespective of the age position. When you go there, you are a student. And when you see a child at the age of 5 or 10 performing so well, you will also be a bit more humble. And if you have to learn and grow, that is more important.
Thank you, sir. That was really inspirational. So before we come to an end of this fireside chat, what, according to you, does the future look like for the young generation in the field of space technology? And what would be your message to the young minds of the nation who are fascinated by space?
Space technology, there is a new space age which has already come from the bipolar world of US and Soviets at one point of time. Today, we talk about individual protagonists or space heroes in the field. And they have shown that you can attempt the frontline areas or the frontiers of space. That's what is happening. So think high, one can do that. Technology, which has to be there to support all these dreams, are there advancing. So we make use of that. And finally, for the whole world, for the humanity, space technology is quite important. Space systems change the quality of life for the humanity. And also it changes the economy. So this is one of the important areas where you can get in, where you can get into cutting edge areas of science and technology, whether it is bioastronautics, astrobiology, astrophysics, all can get into. All applied sciences areas can get into it. All fields of engineering can get into it. Mathematics has its main role. If you have gone to Mars precisely, it is because of mathematicians. So these are all the areas one can get into. So science and technology is going to be a determinant for the development of the nation and for the humanity in the future. And if you look at the way the world has reacted, India has reacted to the pandemic situation, one can see the power of synergy and the focus of finding solutions to a problem. In a normal situation, this would have taken maybe 10 years, but it has taken a few months now to come to a solution in terms of technology, in terms of vaccine, etc. So have finally a large goal, leave a legacy. You should be known by a couple of words at the end of your career. Then IIT, which brought you to this level, your family members, they all feel proud about it. Even though some of them may not be there to see it. Thank you, wish you all the best.
That was truly inspirational. Thank you very much, sir. So that brings us to the end of today's fireside chat. Thank you very much, sir, for spending your valuable time with us. It was really very insightful and inspirational.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Hosting you. To our audience, please find the attendance and feedback form link, which will be shared in the comment section shortly after the lecture, and kindly do fill in the same.
I'm logging.
Participants who attend forum. Sure, sir. Thank you. So next up on Shastra Spotlight, we have fireside chats with Professor John Hennessy, Chairman of Alphabet Inc. at 1 p.m., with Dr. Mohammad Yunus, founder of Grameen Bank, a Nobel Peace Laureate at 3:30 p.m., and another fireside chat with Dr. Viral Shah, founder of Julia Programming Language at 5 p.m. We request you to attend these sessions as well. We thank the audience for tuning in and hope you had a wonderful time. Thank you once again.
Hi, I'm John Hennessy, Professor of Computer Science and Electrical Engineering at Stanford University, and I'm delighted to join Shastra 2021 for a fireside chat, and I hope you'll be able to be with us. Thank you.